The other team, top of the Western Conference, who we haven't really talked about that much, I think they're kind of flying under the radar. The Cavs, the trademark Cavalanche. It feels like every night I'm seeing different Cavs players resting up for the postseason. I'm seeing them fall down by 12, 14, 15 points to the Bulls or to the Nets or whoever it is. And I check the final score and I see that add one to the win column, another win streak, 2 win streaks of 15 plus games in the same season. I talked about how impressive OKC's record is. Cavaliers right now, as we record this, 55-10, another team on pace to win 65 games this season. And they're just doing it methodically, surgically, and different guys stepping up. Honestly, I have had a little more faith in the way that they are constructed. I think there's more star power there, or more known names, known commodities on that team that we know what they're capable of. We've seen Donovan Mitchell do it at the biggest stage, and they have guys who what they do is very consistent. You know, the rebounding and the rim protection and things that Evan Mobley and Jared Allen provide, and Darius Garland's bounce back here. That being said, where do we stand on the Cavaliers right now at this point? Month left in the season, what we've seen from them, the win streaks, their stand and status as a title contender.
Yeah, I think this is going to be like a very narrative driven statement, but like if you were to replace the Cavs with the Thunder and put the Cavs in the Western Conference, I actually think people would be talking about the Cavs a lot differently than the Thunder. Like I think there would be a lot more belief there. It's just that like everybody kind of stopped short with the Cavs because it's like, well, they're not going to get past Boston. And like, I still feel that way. I still think Boston is the better team. I think that when push comes to shove in the playoffs, like, I mean, Donovan Mitchell always kills the Celtics, but Darius Garland has consistently struggled against Drew Holiday and Derek White's physical defense. Sometimes Jaylen Brown, like whoever it is, they match up with them. And then if Porzingis is healthy, that front court matchup, like the 2 times that Cleveland has really dominated the glass and dominated Boston inside, it was both times where Porzingis wasn't available and playing this season. But like, you know, if they were a Western Conference team where Boston was out of the question, I really do think that like people wouldn't kind of be so dismissive about how ridiculous this team has been. And I still don't even think that people understand like how crazy 55-10 is. Like they just they simply don't lose games. Like It just feels like, you know, yes, they're on another 15-game win streak. And I see that. And like, I kind of just shrug my shoulders because they've just been that good all year. And the offense is an absolute wagon. You know, they are, you know, it's just a well-oiled machine on offense. You know, some nights it's Garland, some nights it's Mitchell, some nights it's Mobley, who has taken a massive leap. And, you know, you and I have talked about that already a couple times this season on the pod. Jared Allen, you know, does the work where he can or when he has to. Ty Jerome has been incredible off the bench for them this season. He, you know, is probably like the real most improved player of the year or one of them, but he's not going. It doesn't seem like he's going to get that honor. But this is a guy who was like borderline out of the league. He's bounced around to countless different teams: OKC, Golden State, Phoenix. I'm sure there's other teams that I'm missing as well, but you know, and he finally finds a landing spot in Cleveland where he's really, found a home, and he is thriving in that role. And guys like Max Strus has played in big games before. Dean Wade's played in big games before. Like, these are guys who aren't going to be afraid of the moment. It's a little bit different than OKC in the sense that like last year was the first time Oklahoma City's really made a run like that. Cleveland has a bunch of guys that have been a part of playoff teams that have won series and played in big games. It's just, the reality is it does come down to, will they beat Boston? Do I have any doubt that it's going to be Boston versus Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals? I really think you can stamp that right now. It doesn't feel like one of those bearing injury. It doesn't feel like one of those situations like last year where, you know, maybe Indiana makes a run. I mean, Milwaukee could get hot and they still have Dame and Giannis. And the fact they have those 2 players is always a reason to believe that they can make a run. But whether they get matched up with Boston or Cleveland, I think Cleveland or Boston are the better team, no matter what situation, you know, as long as both teams are healthy. So I'm very confident those 2 teams meet in the Eastern Conference Finals. It's just, will the Cavs season be seen as a success for getting to the conference finals and losing? Like at this point, they've been so good that I think the answer is no. I think they would have to reach the NBA Finals to truly live up to the hype of what this season has been. But that doesn't mean that what they've done this season isn't unprecedented and isn't historically one of the greatest regular seasons that we've seen in our lifetime.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the Cavs, and it's funny, first off, that, man, this team has never been this good before, but it feels like a completely different franchise than LeBron James played for. They went to the finals 4 straight times and won, 60 plus games back in the late 2000s. But it does very much feel very different because he just was larger than life during his time there, both stints, that this is so different. And I think that big part of it, honestly, a market thing, right? Where you're thinking about a Cleveland or an Oklahoma City or a Denver or a Milwaukee, when you are thinking about those teams as being capable of winning, they have a star that is larger than life. Nikola Jokic or Giannis Antetokounmpo or insert whatever, Kevin Durant when he was in OKC and we believed that they could win with him. I think people aren't necessarily recognizing that Shea is that. I think people are questioning whether or not Donovan Mitchell can be that or is that. We know what he's capable of doing in the playoffs, scoring 50-plus points, but that's a different level of stardom that only, a handful of players have reached in NBA history. So it's not even meant to be a knock on him or any of those guys. And I think that that's a big part of it. And I think that that's another way that people are kind of sidestepping the respect that needs to be given to Jason Tatum and his stardom and who he is. And he is by far the best player on that Celtics team. Jaylen Brown, another great player, reigning Finals MVP, and all the pieces to that puzzle that also is a very much a well-oiled machine. And honestly, let's be real. We were having this conversation about them too, right? Like we were having this conversation about the Celtics. Like, can they get over the hump? I won't believe it until I see it. People were picking the Mavericks last year because they had who many believe was a bigger star. I think Jason Tatum has done a lot to dispel that notion lately, but we see that over and over again now. So I think the biggest thing that we'll learn as these playoffs approach and as the season winds down is, do the Cavs, can they be the team? Can the Thunder be the team that dispel those notions, and beat teams that have been there before? We talk about when you mention the teams in the Western Conference that the Thunder are going to have to deal with. Jokic has done it before. LeBron has done it before. Steph has done it before. Jimmy, to a certain extent, has done it before with the Warriors. So it's just interesting the way we feel as fans, seeing players and teams, how markets fit in with that, and how what we've seen people do historically allow us to believe whether or not teams are capable of getting over the hump.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is almost not disappointing, that's not the right word. I'm not really sure what the word I'm looking for is, but the reality of it just is that the conversation that we're having right now, and it's, completely reasonable, but it sort of belittles the regular season and that everything is so, and I feel like the NBA more than any other league, everything is so heavily determined or kind of just the outlook on teams is based on what they do in the postseason. And I've made the comparison to those old Hawks teams. I say old Hawks teams, the early 2000s Hawks teams that were really, really good. Yeah, it has been a while. That were really, really good. And, those teams were loaded and they were the number one seed every year that just couldn't get past LeBron. Right. Here we are 10 years, however many years later. And if you're having a hoop conversation with somebody and you're talking about some old good forgotten teams, someone's always going to throw that Hawks team in the mix. And Donovan Mitchell has kind of in a way been a part of that already. No one's ever really hey man, those Jazz teams, but those Jazz teams are at the top of the West every year with him and Rudy, and those teams were really good. They just couldn't get past whoever it would be, whether it was Golden State, whether it was Houston, those Houston teams kind of a similar way. So it's in order to really be treated like that, upper echelon of teams, you have to get over the hump. You just said it, the Celtics fit that perfectly. It's anytime that anybody would bring up Boston, it's yeah, they're probably the best team in the NBA, but could they get over the hump, or are they capable? Are Jalen and Jason capable of getting over the hump? Can they finally do it? And then they finally do it, and now the conversation shifts dramatically where this year, they've been up and down. They've had a pretty, obviously, still a strong season. They've been almost lockstep with where they were last year. But if that team didn't win the NBA Finals last year, those down moments in this season, they would have gotten absolutely torn apart. They would have been the headlines on First Take in every talk show every single day. Where now you kind of shrug it off a little bit more because they've already done it. Now Cleveland and OKC are two teams that are dealing with that a little bit, where it's okay, until you prove it to us that you can do it, we're basically going to doubt you. And that's just the reality of it. Again, it sort of belittles how good they've been in the regular season. But if those two teams don't make runs to the conference finals, at least, then they could go 73-9 next year. Both teams could win 70 games next year, and everybody's still going to have the same exact take as they do right now, which is we're not going to believe you until you prove it.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's just the way it works, and it's cyclical. And until somebody dethrones the Celtics, that's what you said. That's the conversation. It's they're struggling right now, but until I see a team beat them 4 times in 7 games, I'm not worried about it. And that's just the reality of it. And again, it keeps the challenge. I think it keeps these teams on their toes, and I think it will make for a very exciting postseason and obviously final stretch of the season as well.